What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now. I'm Alex, and in this video, I'm going to provide maybe the hottest take list of the Spider-Man live-action movies. I got 7, obviously the 3 Tobey Maguire, the 2 Andrew Garfield, and the 2 Tom Holland movies, and I want to rank them. And again, as I just said, be prepared, because this is going to have some of the hottest takes known to man in it. There's movies on this list in different areas that I never would have thought would be in certain areas, and I assume maybe you guys wouldn't have thought it would be in certain areas. But I'm going to do my best to try to explain why they are where they are. And before I start, the general idea with this is I feel like watching them, none of them are like my favorite movies of all time. None of them I'd really want to watch like over and over and over. And there's really none of them like that. They're not like absolute garbage either. They kind of fall somewhere in the middle. But I'm kind of basing this off of like which one would I watch? Again, which ones did I just enjoy thoroughly when watching, and which ones, if you ask, like, hey, Alex, would you ever watch these again? Which ones would I actually do that for? That's the main, and it's just my opinion. All of these are just my opinion. They're just my thoughts on the movie. Definitely want to hear your rankings in the comments. And you're going to want to watch this thing all the way through, because here we go. Dead last. This is going to be shocking. Spider-Man 1, the first Tobey Maguire one. This was difficult, and I rest on this, and you'll see as the list goes on, I don't like all that much the Sam Raimi movies. I've always thought that. I came in, gave him a clean slate, gave him a fresh eye, said, I actually went into them saying, I want to like these movies. And for whatever reason, I can't get into 2 of them. I will talk about the third afterwards. And maybe it's in that order, maybe it's not in that order. But I've never really been a big fan of them, and I still hold that. I just, again, in terms of would I watch these again, out of all of them, there's only 2 where I really wouldn't care if I never saw them again in my life. This is one, and then there is another. But that's kind of the idea. I don't think it's horrible, but it's just, it's nothing, in my opinion. Like, Willem Dafoe is great. Green Goblin's cool. But, like, it takes way too long to get, I mean, it's an origin story, obviously, and it's the first origin story, so they kind of have to do it. But I don't know. It didn't really fit. Toby is just a pathetic loser throughout, like, 85% of it. MJ is jumping around like there's nobody's business, which she does quite often in all of the movies, by the way. And it's just not all that. I mean, he's Spider-Man only a couple segments of the movie, which are cool. They're definitely cool scenes. And the finale with Green Goblin is definitely, I mean, that's kind of a blueprint. I was going to say prototype. That's like a blueprint of how you do something that Sam Raimi then couldn't do anything different than. It has to be MJ in distress at the end of all these movies. There's no getting around that, and this is what really started that. Not god-awful, okay? I want to make that clear, but it's never been something that I've really liked, and it still isn't. Second worst, okay, number 6 on the list is Far From Home, Spider-Man Far From Home, so a Tom Holland one. This one, on its entry, like, surface level, it's not that bad. Obviously, visually, it's probably the best one, I'd say, by, like, a lot, but it's about as, I don't even know if, like, unoriginal is the right word, but it just doesn't do anything. Like, it has humor here and there. It's got coolness to it. Like, I like Mysterio's outfit a ton. Too bad his character is just all over the place, and it really comes down to that decision to tie him to Tony. Obviously, there's the thing online with Tom's Spider-Man where it's like people don't like him because he gets so much help, right? All of, like, the suits and all that stuff. And I get that to a degree. I also do think, though, that he didn't necessarily ask for a lot of it. And also, he does do stuff on his own. And also, he makes major decisions on his own. So I don't fully, agree with that. But what I do agree, I guess, from the internet point of view, is that they rely too much on Tony Stark in general. The movies, they just, like, he's too much, present. And the idea that, yes, it's like almost like a funeral service for Tony Stark in this movie. And you understand, though, it came out right after Endgame. Like, I get it. But then to have that villain just be a worker for Tony Stark, it's like, that's just the dumbest idea in the world. And then just, again, it just doesn't feel special. It never did. I like the MJ Peter stuff, but upon watching, I've only seen this movie, I think, twice, maybe 3 times. But they have, like, 2 or 3 interactions with each other that are, like, long. Like, I like the bridge scene, or I don't even know if it's a bridge, but when they find out, or when she says, like, you're Spider-Man, she says, I was only, like, 70% sure. That's probably my favorite scene in the whole movie. I want more of that, and there's none of that. It's very, very few. So this one's kind of just, like, annoying because, like, surface level, in a lot of ways, it's good. Or again, like technology-wise, it's up there. It is the best one. You know what I mean? So it's difficult because it's got some stuff, maybe because of like the flair and coming in after Endgame, and it, you know, again, like it does have those emotions of Tony, and especially like when you're watching it right after Endgame, like if you went to theaters, like you can understand it. But granted, I mean, you could make the argument for like the first Spider-Man. I said that's the worst one. I mean, that came right after a certain event in the U.S. September 11th, we'll just say. I mean, there was a lot of like patriotism in Spider-Man 1 that was, I'm sure, very powerful back then that, you know, you can easily tell, by the way, but it doesn't really do anything, at least for me, like right now. So you could argue the same thing for all of them. But for this one, it's just kind of like, I just don't really care too much about it. Again, if I never saw it again, I wouldn't really care. Number 5 is Spider-Man 2. Now, I'm actually going to cover some of this stuff, by the way, on my second channel because I want to talk about why I believe, and I just, you know, gave you guys the spoiler here. Spider-Man 3 is my favorite of that trilogy, of the Raimi trilogy, because I'm putting Spider-Man 2 right here at number 5, okay? I do think Spider-Man 2 is the best film, best put together of that original trilogy. I think it's kind of obvious in terms of just everything kind of makes sense. Visuals are cool. It's got its big set pieces. It's got the heart. It's got the emotion. It's got a little bit of campiness. Like it's got it all in the most like flowing package. Because 3 definitely doesn't have it in a flowing package. It is in a package. It's just not flowing like from one direction to the other. Spider-Man 2 is that. But with that being said, I'm very confident and very willing to tell you right now, I think it is by far the most boring of the 3. And in a way, I'm actually going against my own principles because maybe I would say if I had a choice, 3 I would watch more, 2 I'd watch the least of the. So like I'd actually maybe watch Spider-Man 1 more than I would watch 2, which maybe you could argue why isn't 2 dead last and 1 is here? That's a good question. I'm not really that sure. I guess I would say because 2 is a better movie. When 2 is working, it's working much better, in my opinion. Again, these are all my opinions, than any part in 1. I like Doc Ock more, although he is barely in it, which again, as a kid growing up, I don't even really realize. You just think of all the Doc Ock scenes, then you watch it and you say, wow, he's not in it. And wow, it takes forever to get started. And wow, they always, I mean, I guess like the third act of a film is always this way, but there tends to be a general nothing going on in Spider-Man right before that third act. That's kind of like, especially in The Amazing Spider-Man, I noticed right before the finale 30, 40 minutes, there's just another batch of like 10, 20, 25 minutes of just probably the most boring part of the movie just right there. And I don't think it's like that for Tom Holland ones, or at least it didn't feel that way to me, but I noticed that for Tobey's and for Andrew's. So, no, I do think it's the most well put together, and for that I give it credit. But I really do believe, because at its most boring, I didn't almost fall asleep. I'm only 25. But I could imagine me in my older years falling asleep watching this because it's just got so much boringness to it. Also, MJ is the worst person in the world in terms of, like, her character. Now, I don't blame Kirsten Dunst for that. I blame the writers, but they make her just, a horrible, horrible person, which, by the way, she literally walks out of the, like, I didn't remember any of that. Truly, again, with these movies, some of which I've only watched, like, one time, I only remember, like, the key things or the things that people talk about the most. I don't really hear people talking about how MJ, feels for Peter, and she's like, well, I'll give you a chance, but at first I don't believe you, then I'm going to give you a chance, but I'm still going to go up right to the wedding day, right up to the last day, not even the last day, the last minute, when I'm supposed to walk down the aisle, and I'm going to leave and say how much I love you. It's like, you couldn't have done that before, and that, like, captures just how horrible she is as an individual. You see it throughout the whole movie, but then that kind of is like the stamp where you're like, yeah, you're awful. And Peter, you're too nice to her, and then you kind of fix that in 3, and then everybody says you're the bad guy. And it's like that's I don't want to get too far into it. I want to get myself in trouble, but no, that's my opinions on MJ in Spider-Man 2. Number 4, I didn't think this would make it that high, but it's The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Now, I made a video on my second channel, I think last week, talking specifically about this movie. Is it as bad as everyone says? And because, again, this movie I'd only ever watched once, so I rewatched it, so I watched it twice now. And at its best, it's maybe the best one. Like, it's got the... I don't even know if it's got the best sequences, but when it's good, it's very good. And it does it for pretty good stretches. It's not even a movie... And this is kind of what I thought going in, because I had remembered some of it. I remembered the first time I watched it, or the only time, I did go to see it in theaters. And I walked out thinking, like, it wasn't good, but I didn't hate it. And then everybody always says how god-awful it is, and it killed the franchise and all that stuff. And I never really, for as much as I really don't care about a lot of these Spider-Man movies, I was like, I really don't know if I agree with that, at least based off of my memory. So going into watching a second time, I was thinking, okay, well, I know there's good in this, but maybe it's like 2 or 3 times, maybe it's for like 30 seconds each, and the rest of it's just god-awful. In reality, it's actually pretty even. I would almost say 50-50 of really good. Anytime Andrew Garfield's on screen, he even saves Harry, who's the absolute worst, and ruins every scene he's in my opinion. Him and an Electro are just so bad consistently. They do a really good job of just consistently being awful that they ruin all their parts, in my opinion. So when Andrew Garfield is on screen, which I realized, again, going in, I was like, wow, he's not in this movie. Like, it's a Spider-Man movie without Spider-Man. Now, yes, he's in, obviously, some parts of it, but they just leave him alone for extended periods of time in this movie to do other things that you could argue, did they have to do them or did they not? But, I mean, leaving him off to the side really, I would say, hurt it. Gwen is perfect. I love Emma Stone as Gwen Stacy a ton. We'll talk about that more, for the first movie. She's great, and he's great, and they are really good together, and there is a lot of good. I personally am fine with I'm not fine with how they use, like, Goblin, but I'm okay with, like, the death, if that makes sense. But I did enjoy it. I will say, again, like, at its best, I loved it. It's the first movie. Let me look at my list here. I would say this is the first movie that I would say, like, I loved several. I maybe loved several things in 2, but maybe not as much. I would say I loved several things in The Amazing Spider-Man 2. And then other things I absolutely hated. And I wouldn't even say, and the thing is, I hated them, and they weren't even, like, so bad that they're good. They're just bad. And that's the difference between this and, other things we'll talk about. Number 3, Spider-Man 3. Can't believe it. Again, growing up, I did not like, really, Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man. I would always laugh at him with his crying because I just thought, I made up a thing in my head that he cried every, 5 minutes, which isn't exactly true. I stretched it a little bit, okay? It actually happens a little less often than I thought. Spider-Man 3, I'm doing a video specifically on my second channel, I believe, tomorrow. So I talk about a lot more there, but I do want to say a little bit, here. I like that it just embraces what it is. Okay, this movie is insane, but I feel like it knows it's insane. And while it's not the most well put together movie, they introduce a villain, get rid of that villain within 10 minutes, and then have to go on to a new villain because they got rid of the old one. And they do that 4 times throughout the movie. It's a messy movie. It's a very messy movie. At the same time, I think there's a lot of good in this movie. This is my favorite Tobey Maguire Peter. It's my favorite Tobey Maguire Spider-Man, maybe mixed with Spider-Man 2. But it's very good. I like that he's actually confident in himself for once. Yes, the egotism is a thing. I understand that. The bully Maguire stuff, I kind of look at that almost separate from the movie. I take the serious part serious, and then when it gets to him dancing in the street, I almost pretend like it's just not the same movie. It's just that's its own literal thing that lives in our universe. That exists, and it just happens to also be in the movie with the same character. And if you do that, you can kind of lean into just how insane it is and like it. I will say I personally love those scenes. I think they're just the stupidest out of that's true. They're so dumb, they're so stupid that I love them. And so again, I think that's the difference. Really, the bad in Spider-Man 3 is bad good. It's so bad that it's good. Whereas in the other ones, it's not that way. And then the good, except for maybe Venom, Eddie Brock and that stuff. I'm not really a big fan. But I would say it's got some really good parts to it. And I liked MJ much better in 3 than I did in 2. She's not great. I still don't really like her in general, but she's at least better. Peter, again, like Tobey Maguire does, I would say the best job. Some of the fights are a little odd, but like Sandman, I've always liked Sandman, and so I like those kind of fights. I liked his character. I like it. I like it. Again, out of those 3 Raimi movies, I'd easily watch this one the most. Like, I could watch it over and over again because it's got good, and then even when it's not good, it's when he's emo, and how can you really hate that, right? At least I understand that now. I didn't understand that back then. So that is number 3. Number 2 is The Amazing Spider-Man. This one was tough, and I really don't want to feel... I tried to tell myself this going into this ranking. I don't want to feel shameful for any of the order that I went, even though these are all hot takes. Like, all of these, I would say, are probably... I don't know. I don't watch any other rankings of Spider-Man movies, but I assume you've never seen one in the rank that I've just done, okay? That's just my assumption. But I don't want to feel bad about what I'm saying, and I think that's just, I just got to be real with you of what I enjoyed. I enjoyed The Amazing Spider-Man a ton. I think it's the better origin story than Tobey Maguire's. I think it does it while being, like, more exciting. Another thing I didn't say in The Amazing Spider-Man 2, Andrew, obviously, as Spider-Man is perfect. I think he's the best one as Spider-Man. He's so good. He's very confident and he's very cool as Peter, which some people were telling me, like, that's okay. Like, he can actually be that way. Toby kind of brought about that stigma that he has to be a pathetic loser when he really doesn't. And I would agree with that. In fact, Tom Holland's is a little bit more, like, he's not like a pathetic loser. He's kind of in the middle. And so that's fine. So Andrew, I think, does a phenomenal job. I love the Spider-Man moments. I love how he moves. His movements are so cool. And obviously that helps, like, with technology. But even, like, his web swinging in the city is really good. Like, it just feels real. His movements with his fights feel real. Again, I just think in terms of, like, an origin story, this does it. And in terms of being a complete movie, here we now enter. I'd only say there's 2 movies that are complete movies from, like, start to finish. Maybe they're not perfect all the way through, but they're pretty good all the way through. I would argue for 2 and 1. And 2 and 1 is in my listing, The Amazing Spider-Man, and then the final one. The other ones, like Spider-Man 3 is not obviously a complete movie. The Amazing Spider-Man 2, I think at its best, is better than The Amazing Spider-Man, but it's got bad parts. Whereas this one, its ceiling maybe isn't as high, but its floor isn't as low. It's in a better area and consistent area throughout the whole movie than any of the other ones, I'd argue. And number 1 is Spider-Man Homecoming. Again, I didn't want to feel bad about this because I know there's people out there that don't like the Tom Holland ones. Complete movie. It's a complete movie. Vulture, I don't know if he... no, I feel like he's probably the best villain. I feel. Like, in terms of me watching, I feel like I like Michael Keaton's Vulture more than any other one. Even The Amazing Spider-Man, I would argue maybe, Lizard is the weaker part of it, especially the CG that is kind of aged, I would say, relatively bad. I love Vulture a lot. I think this one, obviously skipping the origin story has that as its benefit, where it's like it doesn't have to worry about stuff like that. But I think its set pieces are cool. Its final, boss fight is pretty sweet. Again, I get the idea that he needs Tony and all this stuff or relies on him, but not really, because he takes the suit away and he does it without the suit, and he figures the stuff out on his own. And then at the end, he rejects, which I remembered that, but I also kind of forgot it for some reason. It's like he rejects being an Avenger. They offer him a gig, and he says no. Now, he thinks it's a trick or like a test for him, but he still does it. You know what I mean? And so I think that is good character. I do like Tom Holland. I do agree with the general... Well, I don't know if I agree with the Toby thing. Andrew Garfield, I think, is the best Spider-Man. I think Tom Holland is the most consistent through both. Like, he's a pretty solid Spider-Man. He's a pretty solid Peter Parker. I would say that. I'd honestly even say maybe Andrew Garfield's the best Peter as well. As I really don't think I'd say Tobey Maguire is the best. Again, for me, I don't think Tobey Maguire is the best Peter Parker. So I think Tom Holland is very consistent throughout, and I think that helps. I really do, because I think he's a really solid Spider-Man with jokes and just kind of having fun with it, but also emotion. And then as Peter, he feels to me, maybe it's because of his age, right? He was easily the youngest of the... I don't know what they were doing. I think Tobey Maguire was like 26 for the first movie, and like Andrew Garfield was like 27 or 28. It's like, why are you getting people that are almost 30 to play a teenage Peter? I don't understand that. Tom Holland at least made sense. He at least made sense. And I think it worked, and it helps. This entire thing has helped because of that, because he is young. He is a kid. Like, Ned tells him that, like, you are just a kid. And it's like, yeah, you're right. If you said that to Tobey Maguire, I would have laughed at you because a 26-year-old's not a child. So you know what I mean? I think that helps Homecoming. So that would be my ranking. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel for more insane hot takes like this. Let me know your own list in the comments below. All my other stuff is in the description. My Twitter, my second channel. We have Patreon and YouTube memberships. You guys want to support us there. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you all on the next video.